What I'd like to do this morning is not talk so much about some historic uses where we've had incredible success at managing things like genetic abnormalities, simple recessive traits like color and fold, and use of parentage verification. We've had great success applying these technologies to commercial beef production. And I'm not going to talk about that so much, but rather focus on how we're now using DNA technology for the performance traits. Primarily right now at the seed stock level as it relates to bulls that are being sold to commercial producers, but then also give you a glimpse at how downstream from seed stock we're starting to see genomic technologies applied to commercial cattle production. So with that, I thought I'd first just answer the question, why do we put so much emphasis on the bulls? Well, the reason is, for commercial cow-calf producers, a couple of generations of bulls really account for 75% of the genetic makeup of animals. So the better job we can do at describing the genetic differences among the bulls that we trade to commercial producers, the better they can pick bulls that are suited to their situation and improve the genetic merit of their cow herds. So we just swap out some genes among the calf crop and we can make genetic change rather rapidly. Now, I assume that most of you are at least vaguely familiar with expected progeny differences. Would that be the case? True? Now, while we have to use our eyes to exercise good cowboy common sense for selecting bulls for some visual traits like structural soundness and so forth, we use EPDs to select for things like ease of calving, growth, maternal traits, as well as carcass merit. So I've got a couple of slides where I just would like to do a little refresher relative to EPDs. Therese was in the crowd here just a few minutes ago, and about 20 years ago, we did an EPD video to educate producers as to how to use EPDs. And for those of you that missed the video, I'll give you the two-slide update. EPDs are real simple in that they rank animals from best to worst for upwards now of 15 or 20 different traits in most of our breed populations. So simply, they rank animals. EPDs are typically expressed in the trait of interest. So if we're talking about weaning weight, the difference in EPDs of two animals then would indicate the difference in weight of their progeny on average. And of course, that can equate to real dollar differences in more pounds across the scale at selling time. So that's the real simple part of EPDs. The key operative there is ranks. And then the other key takeaway is that young bulls that are bought by commercial cow-calf producers typically, though, have relatively low accuracy. And so there's error associated with their EPDs. And to explain accuracy to you, the next slide indicates that accuracy is a measure that ranges from roughly 0 to 1. As information about offspring of the animal and the animal itself accumulates, accuracy goes up, and the EPD is a truer reflection of true transmitted genetics to progeny. This tries to illustrate that. So there's a big band of error associated with a low accuracy EPD. As lots of progeny are produced, the error of the EPD gets less and less, and it's more precise. So what we're really trying to do is take an animal with low accuracy, here based mainly on pedigree, and jumpstart the accuracy to get rid of about a fourth to a third of the error as we apply the genomic technology. That's the goal, or that's the big picture takeaway. And that's where we are hopeful that as the technology expands and advances in the future, we can get animals to a more and more accurate prediction earlier in life so that commercial cow-calf producers can make the best decisions possible. Now, I know that EPDs are riveting to all of you, and you're probably on the edge of your seat with excitement about EPDs. And I know the folks at Beef and other livestock publications have done a great job in helping us to understand EPDs and how they rank animals. But I was going to do a little example here when our power comes back. And it's an example that we use among our seed stock, but particularly commercial producers to help them not only understand the fundamental aspect of EPDs, but also to understand this new world we're living in now where we have genomic enhanced EPDs. And we do it by making an analogy with sports teams. And we're here in Louisville, home of the Cardinals that just won the national championship. And I dearly wish I had a basketball example, but I'm a college football fan. So I'll do a little college football example with you to help give you an idea of how we are trying to address the issue of technology transfer. So at the level of the cow-calf producer that's buying bulls, how we're trying to help them understand EPDs fundamentally, and then as a jumping off point, how we're trying to help them understand genomic enhanced EPDs and their value. So let's consider this last football season. Last summer, Sports Illustrated published its preseason poll and ranked Alabama #1 and had the following teams in the top 20. I would equate the preseason poll to the likes of EPDs on animals that are based just on their pedigree information. So Nate, we know their sire, we know their dam, and if we take the average of the EPDs on the sire and dam, we can predict their pedigree estimated EPDs. It's genes the animal had the opportunity to inherit based on their parents. That's a little bit like the preseason poll, isn't it? We've got a history of how that team performed in the past. We've graduated a senior class, but we've got the juniors and the sophomores, and we know the transfers, and we know the coaches, and we can kind of predict how a team's going to do based on its pedigree or based on its heritage or past record of performance. But how accurate are these polls? Have you ever asked yourself that question? How accurate do we predict these teams' performance at the end of the season? So now if you'll recall back to college bowl season that happened earlier this year, here's the ranking at the end of the season. And boy, Sports Illustrated did a pretty good job here, didn't they? Alabama was ranked #1 preseason and ranked #1 postseason. Nate, I would imagine the folks in your state were happy about that. Very happy about that. That's right. As am I regarding traditional EPD technology. Based on pedigree and animals' own performance, it's really served our industry very well. And it's created a lot of beef production with a lot fewer cows in the past several decades, and it's been extremely valuable. However, as with all technologies, they're in different states of evolution, aren't they? Going from simple, like the big cell phone that Allison showed this morning, I love that slide, to now our smartphones. And as we go along the road of technology, it gets better and better. And so we're trying to make EPDs better so that we don't have unpleasant surprises. If you look at the preseason poll, USC was ranked #2. Not so good a season, was it, for USC? And this is not a good deal if we characterize a bull based on pedigree and own performance as being really, really good. The seller is not really too happy when the customer comes back and says, hey, that bull really didn't perform up to expectation. And so we don't really want those kind of unpleasant surprises. At the same time, if you're a seller of genetics, you don't necessarily want to sell any animal short. So if we can find those diamonds in the rough, using technology such that they can be valued at time of sale and propagated more rapidly earlier in life, we can exploit that genetic merit to our economic advantage. So hopefully you can kind of see the analogies between how EPDs rank animals, and just like rankings work in sports teams, as games accumulate throughout the season, we get a better and better indication of the true merit of the team. And so as information on the animal accumulates, as well as information on offspring accumulates, we do a better and better job. And so that's how our DNA technology is starting to impact our seed stock production. Just to give you a little glimpse, for those of you that like to look under the hood and try to understand a little bit more about how the technology works, a seed stock producer or a commercial producer would put a spot of blood on a card. It could also be hair sample, semen sample, or a tissue. Then we use technology called the Illumina bovine SNP50B chip, or other genotyping platforms that I'll talk to you a little bit about a little bit later, to determine the genotypes of animals at different locations along the genetic makeup of the animal. So what really happens, though, is the DNA becomes exposed to these microscopic beads on the chip that's being passed around. A chemical reaction occurs that tells us the genotype of the animals, and then we work with breed associations and other collaborators to determine the meaning of those genotypes such that it can then be integrated into genetic evaluation and jumpstart the animal's accuracy earlier in life. All of this technology, though, is dependent upon one thing, and that is really strong collaborations with genetic evaluation service providers, so that we're marrying the best of the time-tested genetic technology that uses pedigree and performance with the new technology of the DNA markers and their meaning. So it blends pedigree, individual animal performance, and then it jumpstarts accuracy earlier in life prior to the time the progeny information come on board. Now the progeny information, the phenotypes, are still as important as ever, because we still want to get animals to higher levels of accuracies than the current DNA technology can provide. But we'll give you a little glimpse at the extent to which we're jump-starting accuracy and helping make animals more reliable. Our company works a lot with the American Angus Association. So just to give you a little bit more glimpse of how this works, every week the American Angus Association and their subsidiary, Angus Genetics Inc., conducts a genetic evaluation that now is blending 17 million pedigree records with even more performance records, and now it's closer to 45,000 DNA test results to produce genomic enhanced EPDs, about 62 million of those every week. And so it's just-in-time technology that's exploiting all of the latest information that's submitted by breeders, and it's being integrated into one best prediction for each trait for animals. So I think that's pretty amazing now that we are generating EPDs that frequently and incorporating that much data. Now, the technology doesn't stop with Angus. There's applications in Hereford, Red Angus, and Simmental and Sim Angus genetics that are also now at work in our seed stock industry and are now starting to take some root. So we'll take a little glimpse at how those are being used and what they really mean. Currently, the price ranges from $75 to $90 for the high-density technology. We'll talk a little bit more about how that has changed adoption here in the recent few months. So just to give you a little look at, okay, what does this really mean for a commercial cow-calf producer that's buying a genomically enhanced bull? These would be correlations that are produced by Angus Genetics Inc. that weight the genomic information as it goes into their genetic evaluation. In parentheses is the proportion of explained variation that the technology brings. So in general, the technology is helping to describe anywhere from about 30 up to about 50% of the variation. Mostly in the 30 range for most traits. Now, what does that mean to a commercial producer? Again, as we talk to them about adoption of the technology, we try to put it in terms that are a bit more tangible and easy for them to understand. And so I'll just direct your attention to this far right-hand column. If you take the pedigree information we talked about before, kind of that pre-season data, and you blend it with the genomic information in the current Angus evaluation, the combined equivalent number of progeny it would take with performance records would equal these numbers, anywhere from 7 or 8 up to about 20. So in essence, the technology is giving us an initial progeny proof that's associated with the EPD to get the accuracy more into the 0.3 range rather than the 0.15 to 0.2 range. So it's equivalent to more than a lifetime of production if you're looking at it from a cow perspective. And in small herds, the better part of a first calf crop that would be contributing to the accuracy of the numbers. Same is true in red Angus and Simmental. You can see this is the amount of genetic variation the technology helps to deliver to the EPD. In Simmental, this is a unique application because that's calibrated across both Simmental as well as the Simmental Angus, Sim Angus hybrids. So the technology was trained using multi-breed genetic evaluation to cover those two populations. And that, I think, is something that we need to think about. Really, the technology in its current state is pretty breed-specific. And that's where we need more power in the technology. But on a breed-specific basis, we can describe quite a lot, a nice portion of the genetic variation. I wanted to give you a little glimpse of what bull sale catalogs are starting to look like. So the important row of information are the EPDs, because that blends all available information. Pedigree contributes to that. The animal's own performance contributes to that. And some producers will tell the genomic percent ranks from the DNA test, and those are all contributing to the EPDs. A lot of numbers. Pretty intimidating for a commercial cow-calf producer. We try to zero them in on the EPDs, but better yet, the economic indexes. So if you're producing for traits related to feedlot and carcass performance, dollar beef ranks animals and marries the economics with the genetics across lots of traits. If you're wanting to produce replacements, dollar W helps cover a cross-section of the traits that relate to weaned calves produced and mature cow size and that sort of thing. As we go forward, it'll be real important to boil all this information down into the form of an index where, by looking at a couple of numbers, the cow-calf producer can make a simple selection. In addition to enhancing the accuracy of EPDs, the technology also promises to help us select for traits that we don't have EPDs available for. In other words, traits that are difficult and hard to measure, like dry matter intake, perhaps tenderness. We have applications at the seed stock level for these things. And while the explained variation for intake and conversion are low, it's a start at trying to give us a tool to help on a front that's important, especially in days of $6 and $7 plus corn and really high ration costs. This will get better as we get more phenotypes collected and are able to train on more powerful data sets. So the beef production timeline is long, and so the idea is we can use the technology to jumpstart accuracy, where it might take us a year or two more to get out to traditional levels of accuracy. We can make fewer mistakes here so that then we don't have to live with those mistakes longer into the future. So seed stock producers are trying to amortize that investment out over 15 or 20 different traits, and also in the case of application to cows, amortize that out over lots of matings into the future to help maximize the return from the investment in the genomic technology. So with that, I'd like to shift gears a little bit. We've talked about how it's being applied at the seed stock level in Angus, Hereford, Red Angus, and Simmental. And there's other breeds with applications in the pipeline and more to come in the months and year or two ahead. But I'd like to talk a little bit about how downstream now we're starting to have genomic applications for commercial cow-calf producers beyond just for their bull buying decisions. But to do so, we really need alternative genotyping platforms that can deliver information at a lower price point, right? Because a commercial cow-calf producer isn't so willing to spend $75, and the return on such investment usually isn't there. So there's a variety of different genotyping platforms that exist today and that are emerging that we think promise better things to come for commercial application. At the top of the food chain, of course, would be complete whole genome sequencing. But there is a research and development chip that has 770,000 markers that now is being used more than you think to learn more about animals. We have the Illumina bovine SNP 50 bead chip that's been in the market that is the foundation upon which most of the high-density seed stock applications have been built. Our competitor has developed a sequence platform that includes 77,000 markers. There's going to be more platforms in this category come along very shortly that contain, or through imputation can be used to get at a bridge to the 50K, but include a few more markers, most of which have been selected off of the real high density to explain that much more variation. And then as subsets of those, there are applications in the market, and more than just the two indicated here, that include a targeted set of markers that explain as much variation as possible for very specific sets of traits that then can be delivered at a price point that can hopefully provide a return on investment to the user. I'm going to talk about one of those, and that is the GENEMAX product that's distributed by our partners at Certified Angus Beef. One of the other benefits of the technology is that all animals that are tested on the high-density platform automatically have their parentage verified. And so at least the foundation of the EPDs are accurate, because we know through experience that roughly 5 to 10% of our pedigrees have error. So it cleans up the pedigree information. But also, those markers can be used if the sire bull battery is tested and the targeted panel contains the same markers, or a subset of those markers. It can be used to assign parentage. So in addition to genomic predictions for these traits that feed into genomic-enhanced EPDs, the marker information is on board for the sires that can be used then when the progeny are tested to assign which sire of a multi-sire breeding pasture produced which specific calves. So that gives us a bridge to the information about what sire produced which calves. And that's a feature of our GENEMAX technology, in that the partners at Angus Genetics Inc. can, more times than not, assign a sire to a specific tested animal as long as the bull battery has been tested. In addition, the other main features of GENEMAX are very targeted. Obviously, marbling is the key driver of Certified Angus Beef acceptance. So that's one trait. Feedlot average daily gain is an important contributor to feedlot profit, and so that's the other feature. The real headliner feature is the GENEMAX score, whereby our partners have essentially developed an index that weights marbling and gain economically to the impact those have on fed cattle profitability. So I'll tell you a little bit about how that works. So if you were a commercial producer and you tested your high percent Angus animals, the product's developed for Angus animals that are ideally straight Angus, but at least 75% or higher. This is, again, pretty breed specific. If you test animals, you're going to get 3 or 4 things, actually. You're going to get a GENEMAX score that ranges from 0 to 1, or from 1 to 100. In this case, the higher the score, the better, because it indicates top ranking. You're also going to get the component traits, and it's a simple score from 1 to 5. Higher is better. And then you're also going to get the assigned sire information. So by looking at this one number, you can tell that that animal ranks in the top 1% of tested animals for combined genetic merit for gain and grade. Now, I'll show you a little bit about how that is being used. For example, we just completed our 3rd different efficacy trial with PRAC feeders. And this just denotes the number of head in each of these GENEMAX score quartiles. So those that were from 80 to 99 on combined genetic merit for gain and grade, there were 83 of them. Their overall average score was 90. They were very high marbling, 4.5 out of 5, and also very high gain. And then you can see these other quartiles and the numbers of heads in each of those groups. So this gives you a little feel for the efficacy. You can see we had a lot of range in marbling of these animals, clear from 1.5 to 4.5. Not much range at all in gain, from almost 3 to a little over 4.5. So let's look at the performance of those animals then when we actually track them through the system. So these animals, again, none of them had much difference in gain, all about the same. But for the high group of animals, they graded 70% CAB and better. They were 5 times more likely to make CAB marbling specs than the animals that ranged from 4 to roughly a score of 40. And you can see the probability of making CAB greatly increases as the GENEMAX score increases. So that's a tool that's been developed for commercial users of Angus genetics. Tom Brink at JBS Five Rivers Feed Yard took a look at those two traits, gain and grade, in about 50,000 head of animals. He just divided a set of cattle into the high gain and grade group and low gain and grade group. There's about $80 difference there if you're in the high group versus the low group. So combined genetic merit for gain and grade do really matter to JBS Five Rivers. So much so that they are doing an interesting project currently that I wanted to share with you just to show how DNA is being applied at the commercial level. They recognize that our nation is short on cows, right? Look at the decline in cow numbers, especially in the southern plains here, where we've had a huge drought for the last couple of years plus. So they were procuring heifers anyway for their natural beef product line, so they thought, hey, why not procure a few more heifers, sort them, synchronize them, breed them, and then sell bred heifers. And those that fall out can go directly into our branded beef program. So that's what they did, and as one of a number of different sorting criteria, they did the GENEMAX on these animals. And so as you can see, we really did separate the animals with the technology. They selected all heifers that were 50 and above on their GENEMAX score. They culled all those that were 50 and below. Again, the idea is to try to exploit some of that $80 advantage that high gaining grade cattle have over low gaining grade cattle and develop a pool of replacement heifers that are also bred to superior AI sires such that they can take advantage of what we hope will be a really robust bred heifer market as it starts to rain later this spring. In our own modeling work with this technology, in the event you select 30% of your heifers based on GENEMAX score, we think there's a little over a $10 head advantage in added gain and grade from each offspring that selected superior female would produce. So over her lifetime, if she produces 6 or 8 calves, that's probably $70 to $90 advantage for those two traits. I wanted to just share a little information about the Sire assignment feature. When JBS Five Rivers procured these heifers, they were from big commercial ranch sources, some of which had done some synchronization in AI, but most of which ran multiple sire breeding pastures. But using the marker information, we were able to assign sires to nearly 300 head of these heifers. And there was a range of sires. You'll recognize these if you're familiar with the Angus business. Very maternal sires here at the top. This helps give us an idea of the best bulls to mate them to not only accentuate their strengths, but correct the weaknesses in the heifers through the bulls that we breed them to. At the same time, there's some sires down here. They're really good carcass animals, but not so good maternally. So we are fixing to breed those to sires that help correct those weaknesses. And that's a place where we can do a lot better job at the commercial level. We're pretty much taking a shotgun approach up until now. And with this sort of technology and advances to this in the future, we can do a lot more precise job at the commercial cow-calf level in the bulls we buy and in managing the genetic merit of the animals. So just to leave you with a few things, we've seen adoption increase appreciably with a appreciably lower price point of the technology. Up until December, the cost of the high-density genotyping at the commercial level ranged from $90 to $135, and now it's from $75 to $90. And that price reduction, as well as some of the recalibration that's helped to explain more variation, is helping to drive better adoption. We have to thank and always be mindful of ways to collaborate, both publicly as well as private, as well as nonprofit, whereby we bring the best of everything to the technology to help it describe variation. And at the commercial level, we're just starting to see things happen. It's an easy sell to convince a commercial producer to buy a genomically tested bull with GEPDs. We're just very much on the very beginning phases of adoption of things like GENEMAX and other tests at the commercial level. And I just wanted to leave you with one last thing. so as to not give the appearance that we're operating in a vacuum, this genomic technology is being applied in beef cattle in other parts of the world as well. We're on our, I think, third calibration currently of the Angus technology in Australia. And this is a picture that a colleague of mine took in Brazil about 2 weeks ago, where we have an application there that is contributing to genomic enhanced EPDs for Nelore cattle. And this particular producer had set up a screen where it ranked animals for a variety of traits as well as a productivity index. And they were doing a demonstration for a group as to sorting heifers with the technology. So we think that with advances in these genotyping platforms, with more data and more genotyped animals, that in beef we'll see similar evolution to what we've seen in dairy, where we're now probably 4 or 5 times as many dairy animals have had the high density and other relatively high density platforms performed on them.